ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
Who's really shifting the dial in Australia right now? The ones who get deals done. They understand the system. They're ambitious, fierce and sometimes even ruthless. But you won't have heard their names before. They are agents of influence. In a brand new series by the Background Briefing team, we investigate the power players shaping the nation right now. Agents of Influence, hosted by me, Thomas Ariti, available wherever you get your podcasts.
It was a decision driven by spite for Sydney man Peter Anderson. He was determined to buy a solar battery for his home so he could take money away from the big power companies while never receiving a hefty power bill again. But his plan came unstuck after agreeing to participate in a so-called virtual power plant. Today, energy reporter Dan Mercer on Peter's dilemma, how giving back to the grid really works and whether it's worth it. I'm Sam Hawley on Gadigal land in Sydney. This is ABC News Daily. Dan, we're going to explain what a virtual power plant is, and it sounds pretty high-tech.
It does, Sam, but it's actually not. A virtual power plant is a real power plant in many ways. It's just made up of hundreds or thousands of individual households. I mean, if your house has solar panels, it's a power plant. And if you add in batteries, a household has the ability to sell power even when the sun goes down. Virtual power plants are really about coordinating all of this diffused capacity. The theory is that if you can coordinate or aggregate, as it's known, enough of them, then the combined capacity can be very significant indeed. Critically, though, they involve householders signing up to become part of a VPP and giving up some control over their batteries and their solar panels in the process. And they can use that to prop up the market when it's under stress. And the market is, under stress more and more as we get deeper into this transition. The quid pro quo is that the householder is supposed to be better off overall. As we're going to hear, there's a sticking point though, because you might want all of your stored power at the same time as the grid needs it.
Yeah, okay. So you've been speaking with Sydney resident Peter Anderson. Now, he signed up his house to be part of a virtual power plant, and that is a completely optional decision, right? He didn't have to, he agreed to.
Yeah, Peter was like millions of Australians in that he already had solar panels on his roof, but he was keen on getting a battery so he could store some of the excess power those panels were generating. And it was the lure of a deal that got him to buy one in the end. In his case, it was from one of the biggest energy retailers in Australia, AGL.
It was a very gentle kind of, hey, this is what it is. We promise we won't do these things. We promise we will do these things. We knock $1,000 off the battery. We put you on a 5-year deal to stay on the program for 5 years. And if you don't, we prorate that $1,000 and ask for that back, which all seemed very reasonable.
In exchange, Mr. Anderson says he agreed to participate in a VPP that was being run by AGL. Funnily enough, he says he didn't really need a battery. He just wanted to stop paying power bills.
Our solar installer, when I first spoke to her, she's like, oh, you don't need a battery. I said, it's not about needing a battery, Lily. It's about spite, taking money away from the power companies.
Don't we all want to stop paying power bills? All right.
It's the dream.
It is. So for a while, for Mr. Anderson, it was fantastic. He got this $1,000 off a battery and he didn't notice anything for ages.
Yeah, that's right, Sam. Peter told me that in the first year after joining the scheme and getting the battery, he barely noticed a thing. Given that, he thought it was a great deal. Money for pretty much nothing.
We'd been on that for a few quarters and the best they got out of us was like 22 cents. So we were pretty smug.
Yeah, and that sounds good too. But things then started to go not quite as he had hoped for, and he accused AGL of pretty much draining his battery until it was almost empty.
Yeah, so after about a year, Mr. Anderson reckons he started noticing some fairly dramatic shifts.
It was just little bits and bobs, and they weren't pulling huge chunks of it. And then one sort of wet Thursday night, they just drained the battery, like completely drained it down to 5%. And we thought, oh, okay, that's new.
Was that a one-off or...?
No, because they did it again the next day. So they charged it and then drained it.
Worse, he says the depletion of his battery forced him to buy power from the grid at just the wrong time, the evening peak when prices are highest.
They changed the way they use the battery from these little bites every now and again to just dragging everything out of it. And you could map when they were doing that to when the price had skyrocketed.
And he says it meant he couldn't run his house off his own battery just when he needed it.
This is an obvious misuse of the virtual power plant solution, where they're draining the battery to service other clients and you're left in the lurch.
There's a side note to this too, Sam. Peter reckons AGL placed him without proper warning on a type of complicated, dynamic charge called a demand tariff. Under a demand tariff, consumers are charged according to their single greatest half-hourly period of electricity use from the grid across an entire month. They're supposed to discourage people from using lots of power in the peak, but a lot of people hate them. AGL insists it gave Peter adequate notification, and it says the two matters are completely separate. Peter says the changes amounted to a double whammy because he was not only having to pay peak prices, he was getting hit by the demand tariff as well.
They were basically forcing us to power our house from the grid and trapping us into using the demand tariff.
Peter told me it was such an unsatisfactory experience that he actually left the VPP scheme shortly after all of this went down. He says he'll manage his own energy needs from now on.
Okay, so what has AGL had to say about all of this?
Well, first of all, AGL disputes any suggestion it drained Peter's battery. A spokeswoman told me the company's policy was to leave at least a fifth of the charge remaining. And as mentioned, on a demand tariff, AGL has very much disputed Mr. Anderson's version of events. But on top of this, AGL says it's the poles and wires companies, and not the retailers, like AGL, that instigate these tariffs in the first place. I should say, Sam, I don't think AGL is applying demand tariffs any longer. There's been such a backlash that I think they've actually walked away from them. Network poles and wires companies, for their part, they say it's completely up to the retailer to decide how to charge households, and it always has been that way.
But tell me, Dan, would Peter have been better off if he just didn't sign up to this in the first place? How would it have worked if he didn't do it?
It's hard to know, to be honest. Yeah. He got $1,000 off the upfront cost of his battery, which isn't nothing. He pulled out of the VPP scheme before the costs of AGL's alleged actions were able to add up to much. But I think it raises very interesting questions about how much value there is in household storage and who should capture it.
All right. Well, Dan, governments and energy companies are really working on storing renewable energy at a very large scale. So just tell me, how significant could homeowners like Peter be to that?
Right now, it's not a lot, but I don't think there are many people out there in the energy industry, at least, who doubt that it'll be big. Just take a look at the number of households with solar. About 1 in 3 has an installation. Now, fewer than 1 in 10 of those has a battery. But that will change because, the cost of batteries is going to come down. Governments will throw more money at them in the form of subsidies and, the technology will mature. The Australian Energy Market Operator expects VPPs to become a big part of the energy mix over the coming decade. Gabrielle Kuiper is an expert in this space. She reckons the number of households that are part of VPPs could eventually number in the millions.
Once we have a lot of batteries and also a lot of electric vehicles with the capacity to feed back into people's homes or the grid, we will see this become a really significant part of the electricity system.
And I guess the regulators, they really don't want virtual power plants to get a bad rap They need them, right? They need people to trust that it's great and they want to opt in.
Absolutely. That's fundamentally a part of this. And I think it's totally fair to say that there's this nagging concern about the risks of VPPs being rejected by the public, particularly if there are more stories like Peter's. If VPPs are going to work, Gabrielle Kuiper says consumers have to be able to trust them. She reckons there's too little information that can help the average householder navigate and make sense of the market. And she's worried consumers could end up missing out on many of the benefits of their own investments, which can be substantial.
The risk is that the aggregators earn a very high proportion of the profits from household and businesses' energy technologies, particularly batteries, and households and businesses don't end up with good value from participating in those VPPs.
It goes to a fundamental point, I think, which is that householders are going to want to be properly rewarded if their gear is going to be used to help the grid.
All right, well, Dan, of course, Labor had a resounding win at the federal election and they're promising to give big subsidies to people to buy home batteries. So I gather that is going to see a lot more of these installed and probably pretty quickly.
That's certainly the expectation, and judging by the news that's out there since Labor made the announcement, the installers are fully booked, Sam.
Yeah.
We've already got a lot of solar in Australia, as mentioned, but AEMO is forecasting the number of installations to double again by 2050. It expects the increase in battery numbers to be far more dramatic. It thinks the number of battery systems in Australia's two biggest grids will soar from about 270,000 battery systems now to 5.6 million by 2050, so quite an extraordinary growth. In the election campaign, Anthony Albanese pledged $2.3 billion for home battery subsidies. It'll apply to people with existing solar as well as those wanting to invest in new solar battery combinations. It won't be means tested, and it'll give about 30% off the cost of getting one of these things. Some of the most popular batteries currently on sale in Australia from the likes of BYD, Chinese company, and Tesla, the big American firm, they cost roughly $12,000 to $14,000 installed. That's before subsidies.
Yeah, so they're still pretty expensive, but there will be a lot more homes with solar and batteries. So if virtual power plants are really important to keeping the grid stable, I guess the question is, will it stay opt-in, or will regulators and the government be quite tempted to force people with batteries to send their power back to the grid when it's needed?
It's a great question, Sam. And to be honest, I'm not sure that it's one which has a clear answer yet. Interestingly, one of the caveats that Labor has put on its battery subsidy scheme, and which other states have also done, is that in order for the battery to be eligible, it has to be what they call VPP ready. It means the battery can technically be integrated with the VPP scheme. In reality, there are some battery manufacturers that don't particularly like or want their products being ultimately controlled by any party other than themselves, by extension, I suppose, the householder that bought them. Tesla is the prime example here. What's pretty clear, though, is that there's a pressing need to better orchestrate all of the household clean tech that's out there. Lots and lots of small-scale systems can add up to very big challenges for an energy system. Equally, they are huge opportunities as well.
All right, well, Dan, you must hear from customers all the time with concerns. So what's your advice to people considering installing a battery and then potentially signing up to a virtual power plant?
Like in any deal you might enter, always read the fine print.
Yes.
I think the more engaged energy consumers, they're going to be fine. The big challenge will be ensuring VPPs can serve the mainstream where most of us are. There's no doubt that rooftop solar combined with batteries and other clean tech can provide immense value to the grid. It can smooth out the troughs when there's too much supply and not enough demand, and vice versa with the peaks. But of course, energy companies know this, and let's be honest, many of them want to capture that value themselves. So what I'm going to be most interested in is whether governments and regulators and the industry itself can get ahead of it to make sure punters get their fair share of the value. And VPPs provide the broadest possible benefit. So if this doesn't happen, VPPs, I think, will struggle to work. Most people will do their own thing and we'll all end up paying more than we should.
Dan Mercer is the ABC's energy reporter. This episode was produced by Sydney Peed and Sam Dunn. Audio production by Adair Shepherd. Our supervising producer is David Cody. I'm Sam Hawley. Thanks for listening.